I never thought I'd be the woman writing one of these posts. But here I am, 33 years old, sitting in my quiet kitchen at 3 a.m., trying to untangle the mess my life has become. My name is Emily, and I live in a small town in Ohio. For the last 10 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage with Jake. Yes, that Jake. The charming, funny guy who lights up every room and remembers the name of the cashier at the grocery store. The Jake who everyone thinks is too good to be true. Turns out, he was. Let me back up a little. Jake and I met when I was 22 and fresh out of college. He was 25, working as a project manager at a construction company, and had this laid-back confidence that made me fall for him instantly. We got married 2 years later, bought a modest house, and started building a life together. I always thought we were a team. We didn't have kids yet, not for lack of trying, but we had plans. Big plans. Or so I thought. The cracks started showing about 6 months ago. Jake began working late more often. At first, I didn't think much of it. He's always been dedicated to his job. But then, his excuses started feeling rehearsed. He'd say, "Babe, I've got a meeting running late," or, "We've got this big client deadline," but the way he avoided eye contact set off alarm bells I didn't want to hear. I ignored it, though. I mean, we've all heard the saying, if you go looking for trouble, you'll find it. I didn't want to be that wife. But things got weirder. He changed his phone password, started showering as soon as he got home, and even bought a new cologne. Jake never cared about cologne. The final straw came last Tuesday. I was cleaning up the living room and found his gym bag. Jake hadn't gone to the gym in years, so I was curious. I unzipped it, expecting to find old sneakers or maybe a forgotten water bottle. Instead, I found a woman's scarf. It was lavender, soft, and reeked of perfume that wasn't mine. My stomach dropped. I didn't confront him right away. I needed to be sure. I know, it sounds insane, like I was plotting something, but I just couldn't handle the idea of accusing Jake without proof. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. The next day, while he was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The password was new, but I guessed it after 3 tries. For anyone curious, it was his high school football jersey number. Men are so predictable. I opened his messages, and there it was. Her name was Lauren. Lauren wasn't just some fling, their texts were intimate. Not just sexually, but emotionally. He called her babe, told her he couldn't wait to see her, and even talked about things I thought were our private jokes. There were pictures too. She was younger, mid-20s, maybe. Blonde, with bright green eyes and a smile that could sell toothpaste. I hated her instantly. I didn't scream or cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my chest had been hollowed out. It was like the version of Jake I knew had died, and this stranger had taken his place. I locked his phone, put it back, and went through the rest of my day in a daze. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there next to him, listening to him breathe, wondering how long he'd been lying to me. Every time he shifted in his sleep, I felt a pang of anger, but it was muted, like my body didn't know how to process what I'd just learned. The next morning, I did something I didn't expect. I called my best friend, Megan. Megan's been my rock since college. She's blunt to the point of being rude sometimes, but I needed that. I told her everything, and she was silent for a long moment before saying, "You need to confront him. Tonight." I spent the rest of the day rehearsing what I'd say. Should I yell? Cry? Pack his things and throw them on the lawn like some bad soap opera? When Jake came home, I just froze. He kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, and that's when it hit me, he wasn't sorry. He didn't even know I knew. So, I decided to play the long game. Over the next week, I kept quiet, but I started gathering evidence. I forwarded their texts to myself, took screenshots, and even found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket. He'd stayed there last weekend when he told me he was at a work retreat. It was all piling up, and I felt like I was living someone else's life. Finally, I cracked. It was a Friday night, and he was heading out for drinks with the guys. I stopped him at the door, holding the scarf I'd found. "Whose is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jake froze. For a split second, I saw panic flash across his face before he covered it with his usual charm. "What?" "Oh, that's Megan's, isn't it? She must have left it here." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Megan's blonde. She doesn't wear lavender." That's when he knew he was caught. His shoulders sagged, and he let out a deep breath. "Emily, I can explain." But I didn't let him. I told him I'd seen the texts, the pictures, the hotel receipt. For the first time in our entire relationship, Jake didn't have anything to say. He just stood there, looking at me like a kid caught stealing candy. I wish I could say I threw him out right then and there, but I didn't. I told him to pack a bag and leave for the weekend. He tried to apologize, but I couldn't even look at him. Once he was gone, I broke down. I sat on the kitchen floor, crying until my chest hurt. It's been 3 weeks since that night. Jake's staying with his brother, and we've barely spoken. He's begging for another chance, saying he'll go to therapy, quit his job, do anything to fix this. But honestly, I don't know if I want to fix it. I keep thinking about Lauren. She's not the problem, Jake is. He's the one who made promises to me. He's the one who lied, cheated, and broke my trust. And now, I'm left picking up the pieces of a life I thought was unbreakable. Part of me wants to believe him when he says it was a mistake, that he'll change. But another part of me knows better. Once trust is gone, can it ever really come back? I don't know where we go from here. Maybe this is the end of our story, or maybe it's just a really ugly chapter. Either way, I'll keep moving forward. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I deserve better. Thanks for reading, I guess. I just needed to get this off my chest. If you've made it this far, tell me, what would you do? I've been reading through the comments on my last post. Thank you to everyone who responded, whether it was with advice, sympathy, or tough love. I didn't expect so many people to care about my little corner of chaos, but your words have been like a flashlight in the dark. For those asking for an update, here it is. Spoiler, it's been a ride. The weekend after I told Jake to leave, I started packing. Not his things, mine. I know, it sounds crazy, but the house started to feel suffocating. Every room held some memory of us, like a ghost that wouldn't let me breathe. I couldn't sit on the couch without thinking about our movie nights. Couldn't walk into the kitchen without hearing his stupid laugh over burned pancakes. I needed space. So, I called Megan and asked if I could crash with her for a while. She didn't even hesitate. "You and the dog. Come over. I've got wine." Jake called me that same night. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was quiet, almost timid. He asked if we could meet to talk. At first, I said no, I wasn't ready. But then he said something that caught me off guard. "Emily, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to understand." Understand? What exactly was there to understand about betrayal? Still, I agreed. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop the next day. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept or shaved in weeks. It was jarring, seeing him like that. Jake's always been the kind of guy who looks put together, even when he's not trying. But this? He looked broken. The excuses. Jake started with the usual, "I'm sorry. I messed up. I never meant to hurt you." I just stared at him, waiting for the real story. And then he gave it to me. Apparently, he met Lauren at a work event. She was one of those networking types, bubbly and full of compliments. He said it started as harmless flirting, but then it escalated. Late night texts turned into lunch dates, which turned into, well, you know the rest. Here's the part that shocked me. He claimed he didn't even like her that much. He said it wasn't about her, it was about him. He felt like he wasn't good enough, like he was failing at life, and Lauren made him feel wanted. Needed. Special. I asked him why he didn't just talk to me about how he was feeling. His answer? I didn't want you to think less of me. That's when I lost it. I told him the person I thought less of wasn't the one who had insecurities, it was the one who lied and cheated instead of facing them. I might have yelled. People were definitely staring, but I didn't care. The aftermath. After our conversation, I decided to file for a separation. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. I couldn't keep living in limbo, waiting for him to prove he could be trusted again. I needed to reclaim my life. Jake didn't take it well. He cried, begged, and promised he'd change. He sent me long, rambling emails about how much he loves me and how he'll never forgive himself for what he did. Part of me wanted to believe him, but another part knew better. Words are cheap. Actions matter. The curveball. Here's where things take a twist. About 2 weeks after I filed for separation, I got a message from Lauren. Yeah, that Lauren. It popped up on Facebook out of nowhere. Her message was unexpected. She apologized. Not in a fake, sorry you found out, kind of way, but in a heartfelt, remorseful way. She said she didn't know Jake was married at first and that when she found out, he assured her we were basically over, but staying together for appearances. She said she felt used, too. I didn't reply right away. I needed time to process. When I finally did, I thanked her for reaching out but told her I couldn't deal with any more drama. She understood and wished me well. I don't know if she was being genuine, but it honestly didn't matter. Her apology didn't change what Jake did. It didn't fix anything. But it did give me a strange sense of closure. Moving forward. So, here I am. 33, living in Megan's guest room, trying to figure out what comes next. It's not glamorous, but it's peaceful. I'm focusing on myself for the first time in years, taking yoga classes, going on long walks with my dog, and even signing up for a photography workshop I've always wanted to try. It feels good. Freeing. As for Jake, he's still staying with his brother. We're only communicating through lawyers right now, and honestly, that's for the best. I don't know if we'll ever have a real conversation again. Maybe someday, when the wounds don't feel so fresh. Or maybe not. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this, I'm stronger than I thought. I survived the worst betrayal of my life, and I'm still standing. Maybe even thriving. And that's enough for now. Thanks for listening, Reddit. You've been my lifeline through all this, and I'm forever grateful. If you've got any more advice, or stories of your own, I'm all ears. Let's keep the conversation going. It's been a little over 3 months since my last post. I didn't plan on writing again, I thought sharing my story would be enough to close that chapter. But as it turns out, moving on isn't as clean and simple as filing paperwork or moving into a friend's guest room. Life's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, surprising. So, here I am, giving you the latest twist in this saga. The divorce papers. Let's start with the basics. The divorce is happening. Jake dragged his feet for a while, trying to convince me to reconsider. He even sent flowers to Megan's house once, which was so out of character it was almost funny. Megan took one look at them and said, "Wow, guilt must be expensive." Eventually, though, he stopped fighting. I think he realized that no matter how many promises he made, the damage was done. We signed the initial paperwork a few weeks ago, and while it felt like a weight off my shoulders, it also felt weird. 10 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of legal documents. It's surreal. An unexpected message. Now, here's where things get interesting. About a month ago, I got another message, this time from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Ben. Ben was my high school boyfriend. We dated for 2 years, broke up when I went to college, and lost touch after that. I hadn't thought about him in ages, but seeing his name in my inbox gave me a weird sense of nostalgia. He'd seen my posts on social media and wanted to check in, saying he'd heard through the grapevine that I was going through a rough time. At first, I didn't reply. I wasn't in the mood to rehash my life story with someone from my past. But a few days later, I found myself sitting in Megan's living room, staring at the message, and thinking, why not? So, I replied. We started catching up, small talk at first, then deeper conversations about where life had taken us. Turns out, Ben had been through his own heartbreak. His wife left him 2 years ago for someone she worked with, and he'd been raising their daughter, Lily, on his own ever since. There was something comforting about talking to someone who got it. Someone who understood the betrayal, the self-doubt, and the long, slow process of rebuilding. Coffee with an old flame. After a few weeks of messaging back and forth, Ben suggested we meet up. Just coffee, nothing more. I was hesitant. Part of me worried it was too soon, that I wasn't ready to see someone new, even if it was someone I'd known forever. But Megan, ever the voice of reason, said, Emily, it's coffee. Not a marriage proposal. So, I went. We met at this little cafe downtown that I hadn't been to in years. When I walked in and saw him sitting there, it was like stepping into a time warp. He looked older, of course, laugh lines around his eyes, a touch of gray in his hair, but he still had that same warm smile I remembered. The conversation was easy, natural. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me about Lily, how she loves painting and wants to be an astronaut one day. I told him about the photography workshop I'd started and how it's been the one thing keeping me sane. For the first time in months, I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. When we finally said goodbye, he hugged me. It wasn't romantic or lingering, it was just, kind. And it made me realize how long it had been since I'd felt that kind of uncomplicated kindness. A new chapter. I've seen Ben a few more times since that day. We've kept things casual, dinner here, a walk in the park there. He introduced me to Lily last weekend, and she's an absolute firecracker. Smart, funny, and way too curious for her own good. She asked me if I was her dad's new girlfriend, which made both of us laugh and blush. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of my marriage, and I don't want to use Ben as some kind of emotional band-aid. But it's nice, having someone in my corner. Someone who doesn't expect me to be perfect, who just listens. Jake's reaction. I haven't told Jake about Ben. It's not his business, and honestly, I don't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking he's still a factor in my life. That said, I did hear through mutual friends that he's been asking about me. Apparently, he's seeing a therapist now and trying to work on himself. Good for him, I guess. But it doesn't change anything for me. Finding myself. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that healing isn't linear. Some days, I feel unstoppable, like I'm finally reclaiming my life. Other days, I wake up and feel like I'm back at square one, wondering if I'll ever fully trust someone again. But here's the thing, I'm learning to be okay with that. To sit with the discomfort and know that it's part of the process. I'm learning to forgive myself for the times I ignored the red flags, and to take pride in the fact that I finally stood up for myself. I'm not the same person I was before Jake cheated. And honestly, I'm glad. Because the woman I'm becoming is stronger, wiser, and braver than I ever thought I could be. Final thoughts. So, that's where I'm at. Still a work in progress, but moving forward one step at a time. Whether or not things with Ben go anywhere, I know I'll be okay. Because for the first time in years, I'm putting myself first. And that feels pretty damn good. Thanks for coming on this journey with me, Reddit. You've been my sounding board, my therapist, and my cheerleader, all rolled into one. If you're going through something similar, just know this, it gets better. Slowly, messily, but it does. And who knows? Maybe the best is yet to come. I didn't think I'd be back with another update, but life seems determined to throw me curveballs. It's funny how you think you've reached the end of a story, only to find out it's just the beginning of a new chapter. So here I am again, 3 a.m., coffee in hand, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. Let's start with the obvious. Things with Ben have progressed, though not in the way I expected. We've been spending more time together, movie nights at his place, trips to the park with Lily, late-night talks that last until dawn. It feels easy with him, like I don't have to pretend to be okay all the time. He's patient with me, which is more than I can say for anyone else in my life right now. But here's the thing, I'm still scared. Terrified, actually. Every time he looks at me with that soft, hopeful smile, I feel this pang of guilt, like I'm betraying some unspoken loyalty to the life I had with Jake. I know it's irrational, Jake betrayed me, not the other way around, but it's hard to shake. Ben, to his credit, gets it. He's been through his own version of this, and he told me the other night that he's not in any rush. We've got time, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Let's just figure it out as we go. I'm trying to take his advice. To let go of the need to have all the answers and just be. It's harder than it sounds. Jake's latest attempt. Of course, because life isn't complicated enough, Jake decided to throw himself back into the mix. I hadn't seen him since the separation papers were filed, but last week, he showed up at Megan's house. Unannounced. I was in the middle of folding laundry when Megan stormed into the room, her face red with anger. "You need to come downstairs," she said. "Right now." There he was, standing on her front porch with a bouquet of flowers and a face full of regret. Megan was ready to call the cops, but I decided to hear him out. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see if there was anything left to say. Jake started with the usual. "I'm sorry. I miss you. I'll do anything to fix this." But then he said something that caught me off guard. "Emily, I know I messed up, but I still believe we're meant to be." I felt my stomach churn. Meant to be? After everything he'd done, how could he still cling to that idea? I told him I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses, but he kept pushing, saying he'd started therapy, quit his job to get away from the toxic environment, and even cut ties with Lauren. "You don't get to decide what's meant to be," I said finally, my voice shaking. "You decided that the moment you broke our vows." For the first time, he looked like he truly understood. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. He left without another word, and I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if that's the end of it, but I hope it is. I need it to be. A big decision. Here's the part one didn't see coming. I've decided to sell the house. Jake and I built so much of our life together in that place, and every time I walk through the door, I feel like I'm stepping into the past. It's time for a fresh start. Ben offered to help me look for a new place, but I told him I needed to do this on my own. He understood. He always does. It's scary, the idea of starting over at 33. But it's also exciting. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control of my life. Like I get to decide what happens next. A moment of clarity. Last night, I had a moment that I think will stay with me forever. I was sitting on Megan's back porch, sipping wine and watching the sunset. Lily had drawn me a picture earlier that day, a wobbly stick figure of me holding hands with her and Ben under a bright yellow sun. I couldn't stop staring at it. Megan came out and sat beside me. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a blanket and waited. Finally, I turned to her and said, "Do you think I'll ever trust someone again?" She thought about it for a moment before answering. "I think trust isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about believing that what's ahead is worth the risk." I don't know if she's right, but I hope she is. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future is brighter than the past. Final thoughts, for now. So, that's where I'm at. Selling the house, figuring out what my next chapter looks like, and trying to let myself feel something other than fear and regret. It's not perfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving forward instead of standing still. I don't know what will happen with Ben, or with Jake, or with anything else. But I do know this: I'm stronger than I was yesterday. And tomorrow, I'll be stronger still. Thanks for sticking with me, Reddit. You've been my sounding board, my therapy, and my community in a way I never expected. I'll keep you posted if anything changes, but for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time.